Good evening, I'm Leland Vittert. We're going to spend the next hour talking about Afghanistan, what it means for America abroad, and more importantly, what it means for Americans here at home. You see, there is now universal agreement that 20 years of al-Qaeda being on the run is over, and we must all worry now about the terror threat against America's homeland once again. Scary thought. The Taliban now controls Afghanistan. Its soldiers triumphantly took over the presidential palace with little resistance from the American-trained and funded Afghan army. They've already begun enforcing a medieval form of Islamic law. We'll get to what that means in a few minutes. And over the weekend, we abandoned our embassy in Kabul and pulled all American personnel back to the airport where they are now. The airport itself is a disaster. You undoubtedly have seen this video with thousands desperate to try and get on flights out of the country. This video shows its best. It's an American C-17. Inside are refugees and evacuees. The jet's taxiing. Hundreds of people are swarming it to cling to the side of the plane. And as the plane takes off and gains altitude, we've blurred it, but you can see people falling off the plane, falling back to the land that they so desperately tried to escape and then died when they reached Earth. Watching this video, you have to ask yourself, what would prompt people to cling to the side of a plane as it takes to the sky? And the answer is simple. Many of them worked for the U.S. military during the 20-year war. Our government promised them and their families protection. Over the past few months, we welched, and they risked falling from an airplane taking off rather than face reprisals from the Taliban. The president was silent over the weekend, came back to the White House this afternoon, and has now returned to Camp David, we're told. We're going to cover all angles on this. We'll get to the president's speech in a minute. For the politics, we have Heather Nauert. She served as the spokesperson of the State Department during the Trump administration. Glad to have her. Dave Sears served 20 years of active military duty. He's been involved in operations in some of the darkest places and horrific conflicts in both Iraq and Afghanistan for some insight on exactly what's happening at the airport. But first, the political storm tearing through the United States. Mike Allen, co-founder of Axios, with us now. Mike, we're going to get a soundbite from the president in a minute, but I summed it up at my attempt at short brevity as you tried Axios better than mine. It's not my fault, but I made the right decision. Fair?
I can do you one better. I can go you even briefer, Leland. The buck stops here, but. And that was the president's message today, that he said off the top, I'm the president of the United States. The buck stops with me. But he said that President Trump had hemmed him in on the timing. He said that Afghans had hemmed him in on the evacuations, that Afghans weren't willing to fight for themselves. So behind the scenes, Leland, Axios reporters are hearing acute frustration from the Biden team about the plans that were left for them by Trump. But I think that what you did off the top was right. This left behind story is the big story. At the very least, thousands of people who work directly with American troops, with the U.S. and its allies in the war effort, at risk to themselves. And when you take in their immediate relatives, for sure, tens of thousands. And this could be interpreters, this could be drivers, this could be cooks, this could be security guards, all kinds of people who made America's massive Afghanistan machinery possible.
Yeah. Heather, I saw you sort of scoff a couple of times at some of the things that Mike reported the president saying. What part of the Trump plan did the Biden administration not follow that would have made today not happen?
Well, first of all, there's enough blame to go around here. I'm not going to defend the Trump administration, nor am I going to defend the Biden administration. Both administrations handled this poorly. Now, the way Trump would have handled it a little differently is would have let the Taliban know right out of the gate that you hurt our Americans, whether they're civilians or whether they're military, and there's going to be hell to pay for that. That's what President Trump would have done. But both administrations, in fact,
forgive me, I thought they
into this
Heather, forgive me, but I thought President Biden made that pretty clear, and certainly the State Department and the Pentagon said we have the right of self-defense, and if you fire on the people at the airport securing the airport, we're going to defend ourselves, didn't they?
Yeah, it wouldn't have gotten this far under the Trump administration. There would have been a much more orderly departure. What we're seeing, and I've worked at the State Department, I've been to Afghanistan with the secretary, I've talked to folks on the ground there, military, and of course those at the State Department. And I can say we're all heartbroken to see what is happening and how this is unfolding. There have been thousands of Afghan civilians who have supported us at the embassy over the years, and the fact that they may not be able to get out, their lives are in danger. Their lives are in jeopardy. Now, what we needed was a far more regimented and orderly departure. There's nothing orderly about this. But again, I think the Trump administration was wrong, and Trump supporters aren't going to want to hear this, in trying to negotiate with these Taliban. While they were Taliban forces that were interested in peace, not these guys. These guys aren't interested in peace, and we're seeing that today.
My father always says you can't have a good deal with bad people, and you could have bad people, picture of Taliban in the dictionary. Dave, what do you make of what's happening at the airport? It was chaotic. We understand, though, now they, meaning the 6,000 U.S. troops, have secured the airport. What do you make of the fact that so far there haven't been shots fired by the Taliban? We're not hearing about suicide bombers attacking the airport. We're not hearing about RPGs being shot at planes that are on the ground.
Yeah, it's still early. I mean, the Taliban's going to try to hedge. Of course, they're still unsure. They don't want to bring the full force of the United States down on them. So if you do try to engage 6,000 guys, the Taliban's going to have a big problem. So those guys are going to secure the airport. You're going to have Marine Expeditionary Units in there doing what they're trained to do, a non-combatant evacuation. And if it goes south, that's going to be when the decisions get made and how far do you go in order to get those people out. And I think you go all the way. But it's a complete disaster from the beginning. It's unbelievable how big a failure this is. And the execution, I'm not talking about the idea of the withdrawal, but the execution of this was horrendous.
Yeah, well, just about a month ago, President Biden told us that the withdrawal was going to be orderly and this was going to be easy. Take a listen.
In no circumstance will you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comfortable.
That was July 8th, Mike, about 40 days ago. Is the White House worried about these sound bites that are really not going to age well?
Well, there's nothing they can do about them. They know that they have to live with them. But Leland, pull back the camera. And in my newsletter this morning, Axios AM, I talked about a system failure. And we have here a failure of imagination about what could have happened and how fast, of intelligence. Clearly, the president, who has access to the best intelligence in the world, just 6 weeks ago, had a very different impression. Just Thursday night, a top Trump-Biden administration official told Axios' Jonathan Swan, August 31st, which is when they'd said all the troops were going to be gone, August 31st is a long ways away. We'll use that time to get the people who have helped the U.S. Their visas. That was Thursday night. So you have a failure of intelligence and, of course, of execution. That no one would argue that whatever they intended to do was perfectly carried out over the last 48 hours.
This did not work out so well. It seems like we also had a failure of communication. This caught our eye. Jen Psaki, the White House spokesperson, left, I guess, on Friday for vacation. And we know this because she put up an out-of-office email response. So when you emailed the White House spokesperson in the midst of undoubtedly the largest crisis the Biden administration has faced, you could argue the greatest foreign policy crisis the U.S. has faced in a number of years, the White House press person's out of the office, and that was Sunday.
Leland, come on. We all work from everywhere. You know that I do. I can work from Maine. You can work from the fancy places that you go. On the list of problems here, I wouldn't focus on that one.
Fair enough. Heather, though,
if I could jump in here, Leland, for a second, and Mike, I'm a huge admirer of your newsletter and what you do in your writings. However, let me say this: this wasn't a failure of intelligence. This was a failure to listen. It was a failure to listen on the part of two separate administrations. I know folks were briefed at the highest level of both administrations that this would happen rapidly, and exactly what the Taliban's plans were. They chose not to listen because they had a policy difference. They had a political difference. They wanted our troops out no matter what, and no matter what it was going to look like. Did they think it would be this bad? Perhaps not, but they were warned. I can assure you of that.
Hey, Dave, I'm interested in how things are going in terms of resources at the airport. We understand the Marines have trained for this. We understand there are contingency plans. But as Heather points out, it seems as though there was a fundamental lack of willingness to plan for things not going well that we held to be truths that were inviolate. Like, nobody bothered to think about, well, what if the Afghan military just gives up?
Yeah, right. The execution for this was terrible. And I think the blame goes all the way around. You can't absolve the Department of Defense. You can't absolve, especially the National Security Council and National Security Advisor. It's their job to push back to the president and say, look, we will execute what you want to get done. Here's how we recommend that we execute it. And you could have left Bagram open, so you had a second airhead. Then you have Kabul Airport. Did you know there should be HESCO barriers around it that should have been fortified? You should have food and water in place. Intelligence.
Dave, I just want to stop you for 1 second. If you ever want a picture of what American air power can do and the goodness of America, you can take a look at the picture here. This is 640 people crammed in to a C-17. Dave, I know you've spent a lot of time on C-17s. They're not comfortable, but by God, these people who helped America and did a lot for us are now on their way out of harm's way. So at least a few promises kept, or 640 promises kept. Mike, point taken in terms of saying that people work from different places and the like. But it's clear the administration was not ready for things to go as bad as they did over the weekend. And what I'm wondering is that have they hit the panic button yet for this week and saying we need all hands on deck? Or is everybody sort of saying, OK, we're going to let the military take it from here. Things are going to be just fine now?
I don't think there's anybody inside the administration who doesn't recognize the gravity of this. And that's why you saw the president coming back to the White House today, addressing the nation. And we've had top administration officials on television saying that this did happen faster than they expected. And so, that's why
Mike, quick,
I would point your viewers.
We're going to try to get the soundbite from President Biden speaking. It wasn't an it was not an Oval Office address, and it was not in prime time. Take a listen.
I stand squarely behind my decision. Mr. Ghani insisted the Afghan forces would fight, but obviously he was wrong. So I'm left again to ask of those who argue that we should stay, how many more generations of America's daughters and sons would you have me send to fight Afghanistan's civil war when Afghan troops will not? How many more lives, American lives, is it worth? How many endless rows of headstones at Arlington National Cemetery? I'm clear on my answer. I will not repeat the mistakes we've made in the past. That no amount of military force would ever deliver a stable, united, secure Afghanistan. What's happening now could just as easily happen 5 years ago or 15 years in the future, past 2 decades. I'm now the 4th American president to preside over war in Afghanistan. 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I will not pass this responsibility on to a 5th president.
Going back to what Dave said, Mike, is there any dissension in the ranks in terms of advising the president to stay in Washington, or a discussion that there needs to be Oval Office addresses?
Leland, 3 things. First, it's prime time, and you just played the president's address, so that took care of that. Second, between the lines for viewers, is to pay attention to the difference between defending the withdrawal policy and defending the method and the reality, the execution of that withdrawal. What you just heard in that bite was defending the policy. The questions will be from both parties will be on what actually happened. And third, Leland, just pointing your viewers again to the left behind issue. The president didn't take questions today, but when the president takes questions, I guarantee you that's going to be a big part of them. And that is what is being done, has been done, will be done for the people who risked their lives for America.
One question to ask the president is that he gave an address, but he didn't take any questions. And you know who took questions? The spokespeople at the Department of Defense and at the State Department. They took the tough questions from the press. In fact, from an Afghan journalist who asked, who is the leader of our country now? What has happened here? The president wasn't willing to take those questions. The president wasn't willing to own leadership at that point. He just pushed it off to other people. And the whole notion that he would completely blame the Afghan government is just sickening to me, especially when the U.S. government negotiated with the Taliban directly and cut the government of Afghanistan out of some of those conversations as well.
Yeah. Dave, last question for you. While certainly humiliating on the world stage, the images we saw today, there hasn't been a single American so far, at least, killed in Afghanistan through this debacle. What changes that calculus, you think, or that reality?
I think it's all in the Taliban's hands now. What do they decide to do? How far do they decide to go? You know, what we overlook is that, yes, a single American has been killed, but I'm talking to my friends that are out there and they're talking to their old interpreters. You know, we have one who's worked with 9 guys. 6 of those guys are dead and unheard from, and their families are dead. So people that worked with America would go out with you, fight with you. They are being killed and they're being purged. And to think that the Taliban is not going to continue that, to try and negotiate with them, is ridiculous. I hope that the U.S. servicemen and the U.S. State Department people, citizens that are there, are able to get out safely. But I would still wait and see, and I would make sure that we have some measures in place to make sure we try and do everything we can to deter the Taliban from touching them and to respond if they do.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time American has left some of its local partners behind. Obviously, Saigon in the picture that everybody's been talking about for the past 6 days. Mike, Heather, Dave, always good to see all of you. We appreciate it.
Leland, thank you for your coverage.
All right. Now some history. There's a reason Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. We're going to take a step back and take a look at how we got to today. America helped teach the Soviets that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires in the 1980s, arming and equipping and training the Mujahideen fighters to deliver Moscow a humiliating defeat. But we screwed up the endgame, and the Taliban came to power, bringing a repressive form of Islam. What does that mean? Well, here are some examples. Women aren't allowed to work outside the house. They're subject to beatings and amputations for not wearing burqas or perhaps wearing nail polish. There's the Taliban flag you see on the other side of the screen. Stonings and public executions are commonplace. Girls as young as 12 can be captured or sold for sex slaves. The list goes on and on. Throughout the 1990s, the world, though, generally looked the other way as the Taliban controlled Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden fit in well with the Taliban, who allowed the al-Qaeda leader to build out his terror network and eventually attack the American homeland. As you might remember, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, the Pentagon was so unprepared for war in Afghanistan, U.S. Special Forces reportedly went to their local bookstores to buy maps of the country. What they found is that it's a country big, landlocked, mountainous, forbidding, with a population roughly that of California. However, in a state roughly the size of Texas. That's the size comparison of Afghanistan. This map shows the original invasion of Afghanistan by U.S. forces. Mazar Sharif in the north, Kabul and Kandahar as well, which were the Taliban strongholds. You might remember the Taliban actually fell relatively quickly. CIA forces went into Afghanistan on September 26th, and by November 12th, just 2 months, the Taliban left Kabul and melted into the hills and countryside, ready for a decades-long battle, a ferocious battle. America's longest war was just beginning. Throughout all of these operations, U.S. Special Forces searched for al-Qaeda and specifically bin Laden, largely coming up dry. The Bush administration devoted hundreds of billions of dollars to nation building and wanted to turn Afghanistan into a Western-style democracy while at the same time fighting the Taliban. Now we move to 2009. President Obama inherited a dangerous situation and surged troops into Afghanistan. At the same time, he started peace talks that, like all negotiations in Afghanistan, turned into a mess. Americans continued to die at the hands of Taliban fighters. We all watched the funerals. In 2011, Mr. Obama announced U.S. Special Forces found Osama bin Laden hiding not in Afghanistan, but in Pakistan. And as you might remember, they killed bin Laden. But the war between U.S. forces and the Taliban raged on in Afghanistan and would till the end of President Obama's term. President Trump campaigned on a promise to end America's endless wars, but found getting out of Afghanistan as difficult as his two predecessors did. However, he was willing to do what those before did not, and we talked about that with Mike and Heather just now. He made a deal directly with the Taliban for protection of U.S. forces in exchange for a complete U.S. withdrawal. That was back in February of 2020. Taliban and U.S. negotiators agreed to a timeline that would have the U.S. forces out of Afghanistan by the middle of this year, about now. It's the only major foreign policy deal that President Biden kept from the Trump era. And in his speech today, President Biden talked about that, how he was bound by the deals of the Trump administration. The politics of that's something we can talk about later, but it's the one deal that President Biden kept. The Taliban for decades like to say that the Americans have the watch, but we, the Taliban, have the time. And as we've seen over the past couple of months, when it was clear America was going to withdraw, the Taliban was ready and waiting. How do we know that? Well, this map shows the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban starting in the spring. So red was April, Taliban-controlled area. August, red, Taliban-controlled area. As you can see, they now control the entire country. The United States trained and equipped Afghan army that was supposed to fight the Taliban simply fell apart, at times not firing a shot and surrendering to Taliban fighters, handing over now to the Taliban billions of dollars in sophisticated American weapons. So, as America's longest war comes to a close, American troops have been in the country 7,240 days. 2,354 U.S. service members have died, 20,000 plus hurt at a cost of $2.6 trillion. There is no elegant way to lose a war, but consider this. It is ending. And President Biden is right. He had two choices. The Arabic saying is, I have two choices, both of which are bitter. Choice one, to accept the humiliating defeat we see today, or send tens of thousands of American GIs back into harm's way to fight the Taliban. His decision was truly that simple, and you heard Mike Allen talk about that a little bit earlier today in the show and said there's a difference between defending the policy of withdrawal and how the withdrawal happened. President Biden is convinced, and he spoke to this honestly, that withdrawing was the right answer. Withdrawing from Afghanistan, where there is a warrior culture made of tribes that have hated each other for centuries. These warriors defeated the British, the Russians, and now the Americans for a simple reason. The empires were unwilling to use the types of medieval and brutal tactics necessary to bring such a culture to heel. Clearly, the Taliban has, and as we are seeing on the streets of Afghanistan right now, is going to continue to use those brutal and repressive tactics. When we come back, we're going to introduce you to 4 Afghans who bravely fought alongside British and American troops. We promised to take care of them, and tonight, they're dead. Welcome back. We've been talking about the thousands of Afghans who are crowding into Kabul's airport trying to evacuate the country as the Taliban takes power. New videos and pictures show the chaos at the airport. It's heartbreaking. In the past 3 days, at least 7 people have died while trying to flee their country. Our next guest spent a lot of time in Afghanistan and posted this picture on his Twitter, writing, "The Afghans we were with in February were all executed outside their homes in Kandahar on Tuesday. They were all murdered by the Taliban for this picture and their actions." James Glancy, former member of the British military, served 3 tours in Afghanistan, now a filmmaker creating a documentary about that country. Mr. Clancy, we appreciate your time. I keep hearing we made a deal with the Taliban, and they weren't supposed to engage in any of these reprisals. I'm sure you're shocked that the Taliban has broken their word.
Well, the deal that was made was not to attack American forces as they look to withdraw. But as everyone knows, the fighting has been going on extensively around Afghanistan. I mean, since the beginning, it's never ended. What really changed was the announcement to withdraw by 9/11 and how quickly it was going to happen. The Taliban then launched a huge offensive after the 1st of May. In fact, when I was out there in February, it was chaos down in Kandahar. But when I went back on a second trip, and I only came back 3 weeks ago, the country had descended into just a complete battleground, a much more regular warfare that you would expect.
Just in those 3 weeks, the Taliban took over so much territory. We put the map up earlier. I want to put the picture up of your friends who were slaughtered by the Taliban, and perhaps their families were as well, for helping British and American forces. Tell us a little bit about them. How do you know them? What were they doing? What happened? How did the Taliban find them?
First of all, to clarify that, around the country, there are different tribal dynamics. And in Kandahar, those men, they were guards. They were trained by the Afghan forces, but this is tribal conflict. They weren't necessarily killed.
James, I'm going to have to interrupt you, and I know you'll understand. We understand we've connected with Holly McKay, who's an independent journalist who's now on the ground in Afghanistan. So we're going to switch over to Holly. James, stand by for us. Holly, we're not going to ask you where you are. We're glad you're safe. Tell us what's happening right now, sunrise Tuesday morning.
Well, it's been a little bit crazy, so to speak, and my life has completely changed. I went from being able to be fairly free and walk through the markets and really enjoy the life. I love Afghanistan. It's absolutely one of my favorite countries in the world. And within just really 30 minutes to an hour, I've been relegated to my home and sort of just hunkered down right now. And as the situation unfolds, but it is a completely new world outside. It's just, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
And when you say new world, by the Taliban taking over, you're wearing a burqa now. You'd be either beaten or arrested if you went out in the street the way you are now. I'm wondering, do you feel safe? Has there been any assurances you're going to be able to get out?
I feel very safe. I'm in really good hands. I'm with my photographer, who is amazing, and also spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. So I do feel very safe. And sort of, I think the situation in Kabul has made things a little bit difficult. Obviously, it's pandemonium there, but I am confident that when the time is right, I will be able to smoothly exit here. And right now, we're all in good health, and
I know anything. So much of your reporting has been about what's happened to the women in Afghanistan. That was such a vibrant community for so long. In the past 20 years, you've had women become doctors and lawyers and members of parliament, and all that's going to end. I'm wondering, as you've talked to women over the past 48 hours, what have they said about the Taliban takeover?
Most women I've talked to are just, they're in absolute shock. So many of these women, their entire lives, the past 20 years, they've grown up and with this new sense of freedom of being able to be basically whoever they want to be, and have got great educations. They become policewomen, doctors, lawyers, teachers. And it wouldn't have been in their wildest dreams that they ever thought that could be ripped from them so quickly. And that is really what has happened over the past few days across the country. Suddenly, all that work and all that effort has been erased. And it's a terrifying feeling. And as you can see, so many Afghans are just desperate to flee. Leland, I can't tell you the amount of Afghans that have been calling me over the past 24 hours, just desperate. What can I do to support them and assist them in documents and paperwork and trying to get out of the country? And I just, the chaos and the lack of preparedness for this is mind-blowing to me. And it's just heartbreaking because they have a genuine fear for their lives. And
well, yeah, we just talked to somebody who lost 4 of his buddies who were translators, Afghans who helped, and they were murdered by the Taliban. So it's a very genuine fear for sure. We've talked a lot about how quickly the Taliban has taken over and how quickly the Afghan army just seemed to continue to just fall apart, for lack of a better term. Is there anger on the streets at the Afghan army? Is there sort of this feeling that they were abandoned? Give me the feeling on the street there.
I think, people have really not much choice right now except to just accept the situation. Otherwise, they're going to put their own personal safety in jeopardy. But I think in the lead up to the fall of Kabul and as cities were falling, there was a frustration. But, so much of it, and I think this is my theory on why the domino effect happened so quickly, much quicker than most people expected, was toward the end of it, the Taliban, who do have a lot of money, were really able to pay off top commanders. They were able to pay off people in government, people in intelligence, basically to get all the information they need. And what I continued to see happen was that leaders, commanders, and also local government leaders were making secret deals with the Taliban in order to give over the city before telling the fighters themselves. Wow. So what was happening was the governors and people and commanders were getting money, leaving the area and either going to another nearby country or to a safe place under the Taliban, allowing the Taliban to come in and leaving these poor soldiers for slaughter. And what we saw is so many soldiers trying to flee and get out, and it's really hard to blame them. How do you fight for a country that isn't fighting for you and that's basically sold you out? It's really painful to see.
It's a stunning perspective. More from Holly on our Instagram and Twitter. Holly, when I was overseas, I used to hate it when anchors would say, stay safe to me. So I won't say that to you. But what I will say is the work you're doing is incredibly important, and we're really proud of you, and we're really grateful that you took some time to be on with us, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation when you get back home, all right?
Thanks for having me, Leland.
All right, Godspeed. We'll be right back. Well, this is a comforting thought to begin. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Taliban prisoners are now all out of prison in Afghanistan, and obviously under a friendly rule now from the Taliban, they can now reconstitute and begin trying not only to attack U.S. interests in the Middle East, but around the world and here at the homeland. Congressman Mark Green has fought terrorists on the battlefields of both Afghanistan and Iraq in the U.S. Army, Special Forces flight surgeon, worked with SEAL Team 6 and our Delta forces as well. Congressman, appreciate it. Are we going to look back on the decisions of today the way the 9/11 Commission looked back on the decision not to kill bin Laden in the late 90s?
Well, I certainly hope so, Leland. Thanks for having me on your show. We absolutely need to get to the bottom of the intel failures that have happened here.
Forgive me, I think you misunderstand the question I'm asking. We had the ability to take out bin Laden in the late 90s. We didn't. Is the decision to give up Afghanistan in the way we have and allow ISIS and Al-Qaeda to reconstitute that same kind of decision to allow people who want to do harm to America a safe haven?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's absolutely what's going to happen. We have allowed basically the Taliban the opportunity to create a haven for terrorists. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they're all going to flock there and train up. This is going to come back to haunt us, especially with a southern border that's wide open. We will revisit this. Americans are at greater risk.
Well, we've got pictures of them all now out of prison. This is from Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. Richard Engel also had video of the large prison break once the Taliban came by. This would be the question, though, and you heard President Biden, I know you watched the speech, defending the policy of withdrawal versus how the withdrawal was done, which anyone can agree was a disaster, but the policy is different. The Afghans weren't going to stay and fight. We've seen this. Should the United States have kept men in harm's way indefinitely to keep from happening what you're describing?
So ask yourself this, Leland, and I heard you earlier in the show talk about basically two choices. There's actually a third choice, and that's the steady state we had right now. And that, yes, that's a little bit of force in the country, but it's way better than what we have now with the failed state. So that middle course would be much safer for the United States of America.
Isn't the fact that the middle course existed was because we had a deal with the Taliban not to attack U.S. troops, and if U.S. troops had stayed, the Taliban would not have been bound by that deal, so we would have had to put in more people?
Yeah, but no American has died in a year and a half, and most of the ground force battles have been done by the Afghan forces with support of the United States. So by us removing our support, they basically lost their will to fight. And you talked about the corruption with your previous guest. So I think that middle state is a better place than we're in today.
Sufficing to say that middle state option doesn't exist anymore, right? Ship sailed?
No, it's gone.
It's
Absolutely.
gone. Okay. As we look about what the implications are, we'll put up the map of what surrounds Afghanistan, some sort of, shall we say, unfriendly places. Iran, China, Pakistan, Iraq. Pakistan and China both have nukes. What are they thinking in Tehran and Beijing and Islamabad right now?
Well, just south of that is India, too. And, that, talking to my contacts there, they're very concerned with basically the disintegration of Afghanistan. You got nukes in Pakistan, you got nukes in India, and of course we got our strategic competitor there in China. It's a mess, and we have to consider very strongly where we put this over the horizon force. I'll be dropping an op-ed very soon that suggests maybe Northwest India, but the Taliban is in control of Afghanistan, and it's chaos.
Yeah, well, it certainly is chaos. I'm thinking not only about the people who are there right now, who are going to be evac out, but there's hundreds of thousands of U.S. service members who served bravely. All of y'all lost friends and comrades and buddies. What's the phone calls going around those groups like today?
Well, it's very disheartening, Leland. I'm hearing from people who were already struggling with the unseen wounds of war, PTSD, things like that, that are struggling with whether or not there was value to their sacrifice. And I would just tell every one of them, absolutely, for 20 years, that service in Afghanistan, those men and women who sacrificed there, were providing freedom from terrorist attacks here in the United States. That service was valuable. And any of them that are struggling, call my office, call Reboot for recovery. You can go to rebootrecovery.com and actually talk to a counselor. Your service was valuable. Never forget that.
I can't think of a better way to end the conversation. Congressman, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leland.
President Biden's policies have caused, shall we say, a lot of consternation and difficulty even within his own party. We're going to talk to a member of President Obama's inner circle who says that President Biden needs to fire some of his national security staff because of the debacle we see right now when we come back. The Biden administration's evacuation of Afghanistan can be described, as we've shown you, as probably flawed at best. A former Obama staffer is now calling on the administration to fire its national security advisor because of this. The people, plans, and process the president has put in place to keep America safe are not working. Those he chose for key positions have repeatedly failed to challenge their own assumptions. It sadly led to the most unnecessary, embarrassing day in the history of the National Security Council. Brett Bruen wrote this. He was director of engagement, global engagement, that is, under the Obama administration, and is with us now. Brett, appreciate you taking some time to chat here. All right. How should he have done it differently? Because as we know, losing a war is rarely elegant.
It is. And look, I think at the end of the day, Biden was dead set on getting out of Afghanistan. It came down to a question of how and when. And as I point out in the piece today for USA Today, he had to depend on advisors who were going to implement that vision. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, needed to tell the president, sir, we're going to need some more time. We're going to need to do it in a different way so that we didn't see events unfold as tragically as they have in Afghanistan.
How do we know that he didn't say that and President Biden said, I don't care, get everybody out?
Well, Leland, I'm in contact both with folks on the National Security Council as well as at the State Department. This administration, this president has not done a great job of taking on board the institutional expertise that exists. Unfortunately, I think a lot of Biden's team came in, they packed the National Security Council with political appointees, the top of the State Department, and they haven't been listening to the career experts out in Kabul at the State Department. And so they certainly are not taking on board enough of the relevant experience, the relevant information. And then at the end of the day, in these meetings that Sullivan and others are having at the National Security Council, they are not challenging assumptions. questions. As I mentioned in the article, they are not asking the right questions. They're not considering the collateral damage, the consequences from some of these choices. We've seen it play out before on the border with decisions on Cuba, Israel, refugees. This is just the latest in a string of them.
Well, certainly it is by far the most transcendent in terms of the narrative, because really, other than Nancy Pelosi, there is nobody defending President Biden right now. There's a few people defending the policy of getting out. Nobody's defending the process of how it was done, with the possible exception of Jake Sullivan, the man you mentioned. Here he is from the Today Show earlier.
We were intending to keep an embassy in Kabul after our military drawdown. So this is not the end of our military drawdown. This is the end of our civilian drawdown. And we had to flow forces back in, as one does in any one of these evacuation-type operations, where you have to remove civilians from an embassy and citizens from the country. And we had a plan in place to do that, and we are executing that.
What fantasy world were they living in that you were going to have the Taliban take over and still have a U.S. embassy there?
Well, here's the problem, Leland. I've been in countries where we've transitioned from a peacekeeping force to local control. There was a long process. There was a plan, and there are a whole lot of preparations that go into it.
Brett, forgive me. Where has that worked? I mean, I'm thinking like maybe the Caucasus, Yugoslavia, something like that. But that's where there wasn't a warring terrorist organization that was going to take over the country and say that there were sworn enemies of the United States.
Well, look, I mean, this is where the U.S. government, both under the Trump administration and under the Biden administration, have done a whole lot to undermine confidence in the government and certainly in the military. I mean, we forced them to release Taliban prisoners. We forced them to make concessions. We didn't even give them the courtesy of letting them know that we were leaving Bagram Air Base. I mean, these are mistakes that unfortunately led to a very chaotic situation in the days that led up to what we have seen transpire over the last several days. And there is blame to be laid at the doorstep of the Oval Office. I think the president did not execute this policy well, and certainly his advisors did not serve him well.
I'm wondering, there's what's happened, which has undoubtedly been really, really embarrassing. But also, what do you make of sort of the really detached kind of indifference over the weekend? The president at Camp David with a picture of him in a polo shirt at an empty table. Is that not somebody saying, Mr. President, I'm sorry, you need to be in Washington?
No, and I tweeted about this because when I saw that photo, the first thing that came to my mind was, where are his advisors? In a situation like this, it's not enough to have them up on the screen. You want them at your side. You want to be able to pull them over.
You want them and you need them there. Brett, unfortunately, we're out of time because we spent a little bit extra with the woman in Afghanistan who we're glad to have had. We're going to have you back to discuss this. Thank you.
You bet.
Amidst all the discussion about the policies and what was right and wrong, you have to keep in mind there are 6,000 American troops right now in Kabul at the airport as the sun rises, there to keep thousands of Americans safe and get those who helped us over the years out. It's worth saying a prayer for them before you go to bed tonight. Prime will be after the break.